I want to start my talk by talking about the shift from project to product culture, right? When I first started out in tech, I'm a developer, and I begrudged PMs because they got in my way. Um, but that's because I didn't think about things holistically as products. I thought I have a project to get done, and you're getting in my way of getting done this project. But your job as a PM is not being a project manager. You're a product manager, and a product has many projects that fall underneath it. And the work is constantly shifting. Some projects are dropped, some are turned into multiple projects. And your job as the product manager is to be CEO of that product, owning every step of it, from ideation to it being created to scaling it, if scaling it makes sense. So, what are the necessary skills to being the CEO of a product? Great question, Jake. Thank you for asking. Well, I want to start off by setting some expectations for this. This is not your run-of-the-mill PM talk about time management. I'm assuming you already have those skills. That's why it's called uncommon skills. Time management's a common skill. I want everyone to understand that these skills are tools and not rules. So if you're taking notes, write that down. Tools, not rules. If that's the tagline for this, yeah, that's the tagline for this talk. Tools, not rules. And I want you to also leave the talk with resources that you can take away and not just nice thoughts. Like, nothing worse than going to a talk and just someone waxing poetic without actually giving you resources, websites you can go to, tips you can use. So hopefully I do that. Each of these points I'm going to run through could be 20-minute talks by themselves. I only have 30 minutes before they pull me off with the canes. So it's going to feel rushed because it is. So let's just get into it. Like I said before, you are always racing the clock. None of these skills are going to change that. If you can't manage your time correctly, then you're shit out of luck. That is the PM's holy grail skill that we pray to every night before we go to bed, is to have better time management. So like, focus on that. Forget this whole talk if you don't have good time management. So without further ado, here are 9 uncommon skills. I'm just kidding. I'm going to talk about myself for a little bit. So my name's Jacob Stevens, Jake Stevens. I'm a startup founder. I used to work at Apple before I quit to start startups myself because I thought I was better than big tech. Turns out I'm not. I'm a PM for those startups, mostly out of necessity, but grew to actually love it. And I used to have awesome hair, but now I don't. I cut it off. And this is my business partner, Isaiah. He's a 7-time founder. 15 years as a PM, consulted for major firms like GE, HP, Raytheon, a bunch of others, led product teams of 50 plus people. So that first skill we're going to talk about is cross-cultural communication. And that's just not to sound PC and fit in. I really think this one matters. And that's just because our world today, we're working with remote teams, right? And that can mean people from all around the country or all around the world. And I've dated, lived with, and worked with people from different countries and backgrounds. So that, not at the same time though, but that has its own advantages and downsides. What I learned through my own personal experience is that metaphors and symbols speak much, much louder than your words. So the more you can try to symbolically explain things through examples or having them explain through symbols or imagery, way better. I want to run through a little framework that Isaiah and I developed called turning the stone, filling the gap, and shaking the tree. So shake the tree, what does that mean? Well, if you have to ask for attention, then you have to ask for attention. Just don't sit there at your desk like waiting. If you're stuck, find someone to talk to about it. And if they're not the person that solves your issue, then have them find you the person that can help solve your issue so that you can get moving and the whole team can get moving. Fill the gaps. So if you're sitting on your thumbs and you don't know what to do, just go off and solve the problem. Like, be proactive. Don't wait for someone to say, hey, that's broke. Be the person that says, hey, that's broke. I'm gonna go fix it. And then turn the stone. Sometimes when you're stuck, the best thing to do, we're all figuring this out as we go. Like, not everyone's gonna have the answers. So instead of hoping that someone will be your savior, go off and do your own research and try to find out if you can solve the problem yourself. Could just be a quick Google search. So the second, it revolves around procrastination, releasing focus and defining when things are done. I realized while I was making this presentation, this was me. So I made this meme describing me making the presentation and trying to perfect it. And what I want to get across here is that perfectionism is masked procrastination. So perfectionism usually starts because you feel safe working on that same thing and moving on feels uncomfy, especially when you don't know what to move on to next. So a resource that I found to be really helpful are making mind maps. So I use Miro, but there's a million of these things you can find online, like Whimsical and a bunch of other ones. But that will help you map out, okay, once I'm finished with this piece, what do I have to work on to next? And what does being finished with this piece actually mean? Like, what's my end outcome that I'm trying to get from the current task, so that you don't spend your time spinning your wheels and just working on what you already know how to work on rather than developing new skills. Our second skill is going to be public speaking. So I want you to think about this. Would you rather have great content presented poorly or decent content presented really well? So who's for great content presented poorly? Raise your hands. One guy. Okay. And then who's for decent content presented well? Obviously much more of us, right? And why is that? Well, when you think about it, at least with the decent content, we can all understand what's going on, right? That's the whole point here. Because when you can all at least understand what's going on, you're working together in common ground. So that's why it's much better. That's why public speaking is going to take you far, far further than just niching down into one particular skill that only you know how to do. So that your three goals in being a good presenter are being heard, your ideas being heard, considered, and implemented. So any conversation, at least one of those should be your goal: to be heard, to be considered, or to have your idea implemented. And that's going to come up a lot because you're often going to have to make that case to a higher up or to your partner. I mean, these skills, by the way, apply to life too, like your partner in a relationship, what have you. Pro tip, if any of you were talking right now, I plan to do this. I guess I expected people to be talking, but they're not. I was going to just, that'd be really awkward, right? And immediately I would have the room's attention back. So you can use that to your advantage. Resources to develop public speaking skills, Toastmasters. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Toastmasters. I have a friend who's the president of a local chapter, so if you wanted to get plugged in, come see me after. Bedside manner. So this one's really important because oftentimes you're gonna need something from someone, but you also have to share bad news. Ew, gross. It's realizing, sharing that bad news is realizing that we all collectively have cancer, but there's hope and we can all solve it together, right? A pro tip here is never delivering a problem without first coming up with a proposed solution. Now I say proposed because it doesn't have to be the solution, but saying that it's proposed means like, hey, I've thought of this already and I'm actively trying to help. I'm trying to solve this with you. So that's really important. That's super, super gonna go a long way. You should triple star that. And then the resources here, I tried to rack my brain for how you could develop this, but you really just have to go through it. Like, it's hard to have the empathy required to deliver bad news without actually having skin in the game. So I don't think anything's gonna help but just, putting yourself in shitty situations. All right, so I'm gonna start with another example for human psychology. Take a look around the room and look for everything red for 10 seconds, go. Okay, now close your eyes. Better do it, I'll do it with you. Don't open them until I say so. Okay, now open them. Now think of everything that was blue. Pretty hard, right? Because you were only looking for things that were red. So what I just did there is I hijacked your what's called RAS. You don't need to remember this, but this is the reticular activating system. So that's pretty much the part of your brain that does critical thinking. So that's a skill that I just used right there to manipulate what you were doing in real time and divert your attention away from everything else, right? And that's just one of many, many things you can learn through learning human psychology and implementing that to get things done that maybe people don't want to do, or having those hard conversations we just talked about. But really, more than anything, understanding your own human psychology, your own insecurities and blind spots will help you way more just better understand the full picture, lean on others where you need to, because you better understand your weaknesses. And if you're anything like me, you've got tons of them. So there's plenty of work to be done between here and here. So you've got a moving laboratory that in your head that you use everywhere you go, so you might as well use it, right? Another thing for me, a pro tip is when you're on YouTube or like Facebook or whatever, try to actually watch the ads that you're being delivered, because they're using these tips like I just use them all the time. So just like take notes if you're feeling bored or whatever. Obviously, if you're just trying to relax, just skip the ad, but it's a good tip. Oh, and for the resource, you should download Duolingo. They do, everyone knows here they do tons of gamification. You could write a whole book on it. So this is how you look trying to describe your data without visualizing it. Look like Charlie did. So to give a little example of what data visualization looks like, I actually drew this up like 20 minutes ago. This diagram, I'm gonna try to walk through it, so bear with me, this is kind of ad hoc. Pretty much describes the stages of a product and each stakeholder in the product along the way. The bullet points are units of time required from each person in each step. So early on, obviously, you're talking to lots of customers, so you need a lot of their time. Then as you move through it, right, you're getting UX and dev involved, so you can mock things up and prototype and work with the customer to kind of get their feedback on it. And then from there, you got a pretty good picture. So you're starting to build. You're getting the executives involved because you may need approval on things and whatnot. Now, the real reason I drew this diagram is to highlight the blocker. And that's that triple point with the execs. And that's where they tell you, no, this isn't good enough, go back, right? Because they're scared, because they don't want to spend money and nothing happens. Your job as a PM is to push on and say, no, we need the real world data, so we have to launch this, we have to get this done. Now, me describing all that to you took 20 seconds and I rushed through it. You got a pretty good picture though, just in those 20 seconds. So visualize your data, try to get your points across better. You can use infogram.com. That's one that I use a lot for this, or you can use pen and paper like I just did. So I love this quote. This is one of my favorites. We're all faced with a series of great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. And adaptability means the opportunity to be the maestro, because that's where you are as a PM, but say a musician's sick or they're just refusing to perform at the standard you need to. You have to be willing to sometimes be the musician. So I'll give like a personal story here. My first product was when I was in college. I was building an app for restaurants. So let you pay for your check by scanning a QR code on your table. I know that sounds routine today, but this was 2018. No one was doing this. And back then, we needed a point of sale for this expo that my college had coming up at the end of the semester that I wanted to demo this at. And you could buy a piece of candy with our point of sale, and then we'd check you out from your phone, and it was gonna be awesome. But we needed an actual point of sale, a POS. And on a college kid's budget, couldn't really afford that. They're like 15 grand to buy one, like full scale. But I needed one because I wanted a real product to test this on. So I had someone on my team that I was managing handle that. He had a couple weeks to work on it. And it was 10 days until the expo, 7 days until the expo, 4 days until the expo. We didn't have a point of sale. So I asked him, like, hey, what's up, man? He's like, I tried to work with the college and like the hospitality department, and they weren't getting it to us. So, he had all of these things come up. So I said, look, I just sat down for an hour and a half. I went on eBay and I found an old restaurant owner that was selling his point of sale from his basement that he didn't use anymore, $100. Got it in the next day with 1 day shipping, and that was what we used, and it worked, right? And if you don't use any of these other skills today, adaptability is the #1 thing you should learn, because sometimes you just have to say, fuck the rest of the rules. I need to get this done because that deadline matters. I need to get this done. So imposing either an artificial, in our case, a real deadline can really go a long way to helping you learn the adaptability skill. Discovery. You can write entire books about discovery, and people have. But this is where you can, well, actually, I'm going to give another example. So say you've got 2 UX researchers on a not yet launched product that 10 people have been working on for half a year. And both of those researchers are saying, but how do we know it will work, to every single idea, wanting to survey statistically significant amounts of people, and coming up concluding that not enough data is to be found each and every time. It's nail biting and it's frustrating. The PM's role here is to explain that actually launching the product will simply create the data. So I told you guys that I was going to tell you what the head of admissions at YC told me is the #1 problem people face when they're launching a product. This is it, overvaluing data. Because when you're early on, you can't get to statistically significant data. It's not possible. You just don't have the data points. You can't interview enough people. You're just a small team usually, right? Unless you're Microsoft or Apple, it's not gonna happen. So you have to launch. You have to get over your fear and just get it done. So a thing that I really like to do, because it's easy to just say do discovery, but a tip that you can take away is to write down your questions beforehand, but even better, write down the likely objections to those questions, because they'll help you make better questions. And then simplification. So word salads aren't tasty, so don't make them. This isn't new. Everything I'm giving here, my favorite mathematician, Richard Feynman, personal role model, came up with this tactic. It's called the Feynman razor. And what that says is basically force yourself to use simple words to describe something. And the reason for that is that requires deeper knowledge, because you actually have to unpack all of the complex words to describe something simply, right? So when you're just sitting there saying buzzwords like synergies and solutions, you're not really understanding the full scope of the problem. You need to actually dive in and simplify things, summarize. Now, the secret bonus 10th skill is actually all of them. It's choosing the right skill at the right time. And like I said in the beginning, if you don't have time management, none of these matter anyways. So that could actually be the 10th skill too, is time management. But understand these are rules, not tools. You don't need to use them all the time, and you don't need to use them in every situation. I've been Jake Stevens. I'm gonna open things up for Q&A for about 10 minutes. But you can scan that QR code to join Isaiah and I's weekly newsletter, where you can learn tips like this all the time. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Sure. What avenues have you found helpful for learning the skills, whether that's training or other things? I noticed you had added little resources along the way, but maybe you could share something that's been especially helpful for you.
Yeah. By the way, if you scan that as well and sign up, I'll email you this slide deck so that you can get the resources. I know some people were taking pictures, so if you want to get that emailed, then just fill that out. But back to your question. I mean, it's trite to say, but just the life experience is like just putting yourself in shitty situations. Isaiah was actually supposed to give this talk, and 2 days ago he asked me to, because he wanted to go on a different camp with his daughter this weekend. So I just said, man, go on that trip. I'll take it. So yeah, that's adaptability right there. Just, you have to put yourself in this situation.
What's a skill that almost made it to the list but didn't make it?
Ooh, that's a super good one. Oh, there's one I literally just deleted last night. Let me think. Technical proficiency. So I come from a developer background turned PM. And that's been so massive because I know the limitations of a product. I know when I'm getting bullshitted, and I know how long things should usually take, right? So that's been so helpful. And they're coming from, and I can empathize with the developer because there's nothing worse than like when a PM doesn't know how long something's supposed to take and they're expecting something way sooner than it should happen. It's awesome on the other side when they think something's going to take weeks, it takes you like a day and you're like, sweet, you just don't tell them. But it sucks when you're on the front side of it. So that's super helpful. I didn't include it because it's hard to develop. And I don't think that's useful to just be like, oh, I have it, so you should too. So that's why I didn't include it.
I can ask a question.
Yeah, go for it.
How do you build cross-cultural communication? How do you build that skill, especially as people are remote, hybrid, and not in the same location?
Great question. So his question is, how do you build cross-cultural communication, especially when your team is remote or hybrid? It's super hard. So I've been a 3-time founder. 2 of them were fully remote. And from the first one, we were successful and it ended up, we ended up being successful with that. But the takeaway I learned is like, you have to schedule time for fun. Like you have to just have meetings that are like just game night. Like we scheduled like bi-weekly Friday night game night. And it was like during normal work hours, so like 3 to 5 p.m. And we just hung out on Zoom and we played like poker or we played like trivia or Jackbox, if you guys know what that is. But like schedule time for fun. That's super important. And like schedule it and make it religious. And like, yeah, that's the tip.
There's one you didn't talk about, where you know, if you had reactions, and that's knowing when to say I don't know. Like a developer comes to you and says, so what's the best way to do this? At what kind of opportunity do you say, I don't know? And what do you do about it?
So his point was the skill I forgot is saying when you don't know and what time you should say, I don't know. And to your question, I'm actually going to say, I don't know. I haven't sat here and thought through that. Yeah, and on that point on adaptability, where I had to jump in, where my co-founder at the time in college, Dan, couldn't meet it, I remember after that, he felt a lot of shame because I got done in 2 hours what he had spent weeks trying to do. That's not because I'm better than him. It's just because I had a set of fresh eyes, right? And I remember him like beating himself up for it. He's like, man, like, I'm sorry. Like, I've been working on this so long and I couldn't get it done. And you have to approach those conversations with a lot of empathy of like, hey man, it's going to be the same thing sometimes. Like you're going to do the same thing to me and we're going to work through it. And the goal is to get the job done before the deadline.
Can I add something to that real quick?
Yeah.
Real quick, I was a pragmatic when they kind of coined that CEO of the product, and it was initially established about accountability. As your product was like your business, you were CEO of that business. The reason why it's gotten a lot of negativity, I believe, is because some people took it as behavioral. I'm the CEO, my way goes,
Yeah.
I have the right answer. But it really was about accountability, looking at profitability, looking at revenue, running it like your business, not behavior. Just a little history from the old guy in the room.
Yeah, thanks, John. Paying attention to like the top line metrics, like what's actually moving the needle, not just am I getting my way as product manager or CEO or whoever. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
So our team has people in different cities, different states, different countries. So by default, we already have unlimited time. But I noticed that sometimes we'll have really, really good conversations, which I am completely, because on the one hand, I'm like, well, we have a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's get through it. But on the other hand, it's a really good conversation.
Yeah.
I
I do, and I don't know if this answers your question, but Isaiah and I developed a framework called ideation instead of brainstorming. And that can really help crunch down the time you're spending on those sorts of conversations. So basically, instead of traditional brainstorming where everyone comes together in a meeting, maybe you're just after lunch, so you're a little groggy, and then like one person's like, all right, we're gonna talk about how to, I don't know, marketing channels, right? Like new marketing channels we could work through. One person's usually gonna lead the meeting, right? Like one person usually has most of the ideas. It's like a Pareto distribution. And everyone else is just gonna kind of piggyback off those ideas. Instead, Isaiah and I are big advocates of ideation, which says, okay, everyone, we're gonna have a meeting on marketing channels. I want everyone to break off separately for 10 minutes and write down all their thoughts on new marketing channels. And then we're gonna come together at the end of 10 minutes with all of our ideas. You're gonna have lots of overlap there, but you're gonna get more done in 10 minutes separate and then 10 minutes together than you would probably in an hour together. So, yeah, does that answer your question? Cool. All right, thank you guys, appreciate it.